I'm the founder of Blueprints and the inventor of Touch Market, but today I'm going to be talking about sound options, which is a new primitive I recently designed that allows us to create arbitrarily shaped option strategies to have complete control over how much we earn, how much our position is worth as a function of the future price. Obviously, this may seem like a very simple task because we can simply deposit funds into some protocol and then have an oracle decide, well, who gets allocated how much based on the payoff function. But what we really want to do is make it oracleless entirely. So, but I'll talk about it a little later. First, a few words about me. I am a security researcher. I did multiple audits, got several bug bounties, was top 3 at several audit contests, and contributed to the space as Sherlock's head of judging. Right now, I'm a founder at Blueprints, inventor of Touch Market, and I love to explore. Okay. It's because it was too far from my mouth, I think. All right. And I'm an explorer. I love math. I love thinking about why do things work, how they can work better than they currently do. And this is why I'm interested in sciences and informatics as well. And this is, I think, a perfect example of my obsession about working optimally, because I saw that the options as they currently are do not work efficiently at all. And even TrotFi, given its very long history, has points where the options protocols implemented in legal terms could be way more efficient than they currently are. And we're going to be talking about that too. So, when it comes to the design objectives of our dream oracle, sound options, first of all, we want to be oracleless. And I'm saying no cap because very often protocols say they are oracleless, but they're not. They don't use an external oracle, but they do have an internal oracle. And it is very important to distinguish whether a protocol has an internal oracle or not. How do we do that? We can observe the system from the perspective of multiple participants and assume that every participant can have a different perception of the price. For example, they're looking at a different venue. Obviously, for assets like ETH or BTC, this isn't going to make a huge difference, usually at least. But for assets that are very illiquid or have very few venues they trade on, this is pretty important. So first of all, price is subjective. And then the system has to work well from the perspective of every single participant. And every single participant can have a different perception of the price. And our protocol will work in this scenario. It is also important to note when it comes to oraclelessness that we cannot have liquidations or any margin systems because we can objectively see whether a liquidation has happened or not. And if one participant doesn't think that the price will touch the liquidation threshold, then this will look wrong to them. So they will see the system as failing. And the second property is all positions are tokenizable. We are not interested in entering positions in a math sense, where we have some balance that we deposit, and then we can enter some new positions within this whole system. Every single position has to be tokenizable, so it cannot convey debt. This is not a huge limitation. It's rather a refinement of thinking. If we can tokenize always accounts in our current systems, right? So let's think of these positions as even sub-accounts that are being traded. But what we want to ensure is that we don't lie to each other when it comes to being able to convey debt. And because if one person can have a negative value of some position, then another one will think they will have a much more positive one, which cannot be done. So we want to be very, very specific about what the value is. In general, no token can have a negative value. It can have a value of 0. The value is subjective again. It can have a value of 0, and it can be positive. It cannot be negative. We can simply ignore or transfer the tokens out. Thirdly, they're fully collateralized. We're not going to be preying on any price behavior, like, oh, I hope the price is going to be stable. It's not going to jump 1000x in either direction. There's going to be nothing of sorts. Every single position has to be fully collateralized, and we do not accept IOUs. Obviously, this protocol is defined for arbitrary tokens. So by choosing the token that is not, for example, dollars by dollar, but dollar IOUs, we can create a system where we actually don't have to collateralize. So we can have the same capital efficiency in these terms by using IOUs generated by some entity, like in TradFi right now. And we're not constrained to have this done soundly, so without using IOUs, but we can do that. And then lastly, and this is, I think, the most difficult part, because otherwise it wouldn't be nearly at all innovative, it can be perfectly capital efficient. And I do not mean capital efficiency in terms of how I think it's popularized when it comes to lending in DeFi, because capital efficiency is usually considered to be LTV. Capital efficiency here, which will mean that it does not matter that if I am told that I will receive a certain payout in the future, and no matter what the future will be, a payout will be at least a certain amount, then it means that I'm not actually risking this amount by entering a position, which means that it's just idle funds sitting there. And this is not capital efficient. So we will achieve capital efficiency if there will be a certain scenario when it comes to the future price behavior that will make our position worthless. And to even talk about what I'm going to be talking about, we have to know what payoff functions are. And these are simply functions of value. How valuable do I want my position or my instrument that I acquired? How valuable do I want it to be, depending on the future price of an asset? So let's define some terms that we're going to be using. The numerator is the asset that we consider the measure of value, is the asset in which we describe the price. So when I say ETH is at $4,500, it means that the dollars are the numerator. And this is the first example of a payoff function that we're looking at. On the y-axis, we have the value of my instrument, and on the x-axis, we have the price. So no matter what ETH, in our example, what ETH price is, $1 is worth $1. And it's a constant. Now, the second asset we're going to be considering is the speculative. It's the asset which changes value in our thinking. And, for example, ETH. And as we can see, in terms of dollars, as the dollar price of ETH changes, the value rises linearly. The ETH value rises. Is that clear? Awesome. Now, what kind of payoffs can we get by simply combining these? Well, it's not a fascinating topic, really, but I think it's sufficient for many people to get excited because, people love trading. We can have a constant function like displayed before. We can have a slightly increasing. We can have even more and very increasing, depending on the allocation of our funds to numerator versus the speculative. But this is not interesting, and we can see the expressivity isn't high in here. We only have control over really two parameters, or even one, depending on whether we have constrained funds or not. But we want more. In order to get full control over what kinds of positions are we entering, what is important to me as a position owner. Do I prefer yield? Do I prefer to earn on upsides or downsides? We would like to customize this function to be perfect for me, perfect for everyone. And depending on the use case, we will use very different payoff functions. In general, this idea of defining a payoff function dependent on the future price generalizes 80% of finance's concepts. It unifies them. It's lending. It's corporate debt structure. It is speculation. It is liquidity provision, mortgages, and tranching, obviously. So how to use them is the least of the concern. They implement practically everything possible without oracles, without determining, and without liquidations. That's very important. Now, let's first analyze the simple sound options, which are the basic spells. And for that, for the illustration, I'm gonna we have to introduce first the parameters that we're going to be considering these options with respect to. So first of all, we have the asset pair. So we determine the speculative and the numeric asset. We also determine the strike price, which will be the ratio I'll mention in a second. And third, expiry. It is the time at which the price will be is on the x-axis of the payoffs graphs, right? So we're interested, for example, in what the price is going to be at the end of the year. And then depending on that, I will determine how valuable do I want my position to be. We can play a game. On one hand, I'm going to give you $4,500. And on the other, there's 1 ETH. And I'm going to tell you, which one do you choose? Assuming that you can, at zero cost, swap one into the other. For now, let's say you have a defined price. Well, obviously, you're going to choose the one that's worth more, depending on the ETH price. But the problem arises when we consider the future price, because none of us know what the future price is going to be. So the best way is to wait. If I give you the optionality to choose until the end of the year, you probably want to take as much time as you want in order to get to understand as best as possible which asset is going to be worth more, and then pick one. Obviously, I'm not going to give you this right for free. I'm probably going to charge you more than $4,500 because that's one of the options that you can choose. But this introduces nonlinearity, which is very exciting because we're not now constrained to just a linear function. If I give you a choice, you can either choose, if the ETH price is very small, below this strike price, which is the ratio of the things I'm giving you to choose from. It was 4,500 in this case. If the price is below it, then obviously 4,500 is worth more. So you'll choose the cash, and the cash has a constant payoff function. Now, at $4,500, an interesting thing happened. Your best strategy changes, and this changes to claim the speculative asset, Ether, and that scales together with the price. So we have this beautiful payoff, and we've gotten rid of linearity. And we can do very interesting things with this. What I will expect from you when I give you this choice is I will expect that I will be left with the asset that's worth less, the least valuable of the two, obviously given the ratio. So, and I'll call this a short option. If ETH is worth less, then I'm just going to have the payoff of ETH for low prices, and for high prices, I'm going to be left with dollars. Obviously, you may have a different perception of price, but that's okay. I can be happier than this. I can get the more valuable one, to me at least. But in a general scenario, it's not a problem if I get more. I'm definitely not going to be unhappy. But this is what I expect, and this is the worst case scenario. And we can see that this makes sense. Now, it's scaled a little bit, but this is the short option, the blue one. The red one is the choice option. And as we can see, they sum up to this purple one, which is the sum of $4,500 and 1 ETH, right? So we haven't lost any value. That's great. We can also observe that payoffs are always additive. Whenever we have a payoff, if we deposit a certain amount of cash and speculative asset, and we distribute them into 2 tokens, one being able to claim one, the other being left with what's there, the sum of the payoffs are equal to each other. So these two sum up to the reserves. This is an important observation. Now, we don't really have to hold all the assets till maturity. Instead, you can just claim one of the assets and do whatever you want with that when I give you the choice. And potentially switch to the other one just before expiry, for example, when you actually want to make the decision. And this is where we start differentiating. So if we take out initially the numerator, then we lower the function by the value of the numerator, right? And this is called a call. I'm pretty sure many of you know these functions. On the other hand, if we take out the speculative, we subtract a linear function, and this is what we are left with. And up to this point, TradFi has kept up. Now we're gonna introduce things that haven't been invented yet. First of all, if I expect the short option to be the minimum of these 2 assets, then I'll let you claim one of the assets and then potentially switch. Why would I allow you to switch only once? There's no point. I already expect to have the least valuable one, least valuable instrument of those 2 deposits. So I can actually give you the right to swap back always. If you take one and swap, you can swap back and forth until expiry. And at expiry, I'm going to claim what's left, which is going to be the least valuable one, according to my expectations. For those who are more interested in options, this is called time value, and time value of American options is lost whenever exercising them. This is why it's usually best to exercise them at expiry. But in here, we don't have to lose this time value. We can maintain it. So whenever we exercise a call, which is the right to buy an asset, what we really do is we deposit some numerator, what we pay for, and then we change this back into this choice payoff, and then we take out the speculative, which is what we're supposedly buying, and getting a put. And now we don't destroy any payoffs, and all the values maintained. So this is all the options we have. We have a sound call, sound put, and a sound short. Also note that the sound short, I'm calling it short, but this is not a short exposure to an asset. Whenever the price is rising, I cannot lose. I never lose. I can either earn or stay constant. This is called short because of TradFi's naming. We're going to see here. So in TradFi, and please don't remember this, or don't look at it too hard, because we, instead of the value, we have the P&L, and it can be negative. And what they do, they don't think in terms of collateralizing, so they don't have the necessity for these functions to be always non-negative, right? We cannot lie to ourselves. That was the goal in here. So whenever we would think the value is negative, that's not the case. Someone would just leave the token. But TradFi can do that. In TradFi, you can have something of negative value because you're assumed that you'll never go bankrupt. And this is very interesting in this case, where this is actually a mathematical function which is constant and decreases, and it goes there and there, and probably enters the Earth and goes on the other way, goes out on the other way, and it's infinite loss. Do you know any firms that can cover an infinite loss? Great example. One example. Awesome. Yeah, but normally, and that happened, I think, during the bailout. This is exactly what happened. But it's unsound to think this way. And what do we do about it? Well, we can come up with a very creative solution to this. What if we hedged it? We bought a speculative asset which has an increases towards infinity, and we hedge it this way. Then we can cover infinite debt, right? Well, then it means that this whole position, the collateral is added to the position, and what becomes of it? It becomes a short put option. And this is why we only have 3 options, only single short and 2 relevant here. They're also decreased, as you can see, by their price, because they think of them in terms of the P&L. So the price is included here as well. Okay. And so when it comes to comparing these two, as I said, there's a single short payoff because we cannot cover infinite debt. We do not assume anything about the price. It can go up 1,000,000%. We can undo the exercise, and when exercising a call, we get a put. When exercising a call, we get a put, we get a call. We never lose any time value. And then it is counterparty independent. So we think of them as separate positions, and because of that, we're not dependent on someone's solvency, and the counterparty isn't within the option parameters, which is very important because now all options can be fungible. Now, what we've been waiting for, how do we introduce multi-leg strategies? For now, we've been thinking of options at only one strike price, but we can obviously have several different strike prices. We can have any strike prices that we want, and we can add them. As we said, options are additive, payoff functions are additive. And this is an example. In TradFi, they call it a bull spread, and it's a pretty useful position in many cases. For example, we want to speculate. If the price is here, I can have insanely huge leverage without liquidations just by defining it. That's amazing. And it's unlimited. I can have this as vertical as I want. But when we try to replicate these using baskets, we approach a problem. It's not capital efficient. As we can see, towards infinity, this function is constant. So we cannot use any calls because calls are towards infinity. They have a slope of 1, and we cannot counter this with any other payoff. So we can only use shorts and puts. Now, put increases the slope by 1. So here we have slope 0. Here we have positive slope. So we'll use puts in here and then shorts in here because they decrease the slope. When we do that, this is the put I was talking about. This is the call the short I was talking about. When we sum these up, we get this, the purple line, and it has the shape that we wanted, but there's something wrong with it. It's very high. It doesn't have a 0, for example. So at all prices, it's going to have a value of at least K1. This is the height of K1. And this is pretty inefficient. When we have these two options, we start to be capital inefficient. Now we want to fix it. So we want to generalize it to any functions, and even functions that do not have are not only linear, piecewise linear, or piecewise affine, but we can generalize this to any functions with some constraints when it comes to the ability to collateralize. For example, sine. If I think the price is at the end of 2025 is going to be close to a whole 1,000, Or we can have continuous leverage. It has been tried before in Squeeze, but there was funding. Instead, we can have continuous leverage up to a certain point and then just linear. And we can just prepay for this and have a guarantee, with liquidation as a guarantee that it's going to work. We can also define LP liquidity. And for example, the square root function is the payoff of LPs in UniV2, and xy equals k follows from this curve, and all LP behavior follows from this curve, which is given the parameters. So how to replicate this smoothness? Well, we just have to spread out the options strikes across a range. So we kind of have option density instead of options sitting at a certain point. So let me propose a set of very, very simple rules that is going to solve our problem of capital efficiency. First of all, we can always deposit. We can deposit both numeraire and the speculative. This is pretty simple. And then we get the payoff function. We represent all positions with a payoff function. We get a payoff function either constant or linear. Secondly, we can merge and split them. And by that, I mean, if I have any certain position, I can turn it into multiple positions whose sum is the initial position, and the other way around. That is, that's exactly what we did initially. We split the sum of numeraire and speculative into two options, a choice and a short one. But we have a limitation. We can do that as long as the functions are non-negative. Otherwise, we cannot. And yeah, you may think, well, now we probably need a rule that pins these prices, pins the values of the positions to what we actually define them to be. But these are actually sufficient already. These are sufficient to describe calls and puts and all the mechanics about them. So when we have, let's say I want to create a call option. I deposit some speculative using the first rule, then I split it. I split it into a short option and a call option using the second rule, because these sum up to the initial one. Now, in order to exercise it, all I need to do, if I have a call, is I deposit the numeraire, so I take it higher and create a choice payoff, and take out the speculative, because well, I can do that because now the payoff function contains the speculative, and I'm left with a put. So I can already exercise calls and puts simply based on these two rules. Now, the only rule we're missing is for short options. So we have a third rule, and it says for all everything, every position on our protocol at expiry turns worthless, except for short options, or in general concave payoffs when you consider baskets of them. Except for these options, which are, we can just claim the remaining reserves, like we did in our initial design, where we had a set of, we gave a choice, and then whatever left, we claimed. And this is exactly what we do. Whatever left is there for them to claim. Now, thanks to this, we can always take the following way to resolve, to settle any position. Obviously, the first and best way, probably, is to sell the position. Because if me and some counterparty are having opposite positions, one can buy from the other if we agree on the current price and on the value. And then we don't even need a settlement process. This is the easiest one. Doesn't require any game theory. But now if we do, we already know how to replicate shapes using these fundamental options. We can always increase the payoff, decrease the payoff, and add numerator. So what we do is if we have a certain payoff, we just try to replicate it using a set of options. And then we see how high does it have to be. And we deposit that much numerator or speculative, however much we need, and split them into the options. And then we exercise those which we can, and then we're left with short options. And this perfectly settles. But we can do some optimizations. For example, if I think the price is going to be somewhere in this spike, I know all the other spikes are not going to bring me any value. So for simplicity, or even not to need so much capital to deposit at settlement only, I can limit myself to a single spike, and then simply add a put option here, 2 shorts here, and a put option here. And that's it. I only need to increase it a little bit to settle it using our initial options. Now, well, okay, that's a cool story, but how do we exactly know that the short options can really, that there is enough reserves for short options to claim? That's the only caveat, right? Everything else seems to work. Well, I'm wondering if we have time. I don't think we do. But I'm going to go through it very quickly. So this is not, don't get scared of this graph. It's going to be okay. The green line, the green continuous line, is the sum of all short options, of the pairs of these options. Now, we also know that all the reserves, the pairs of the reserves, are the sum of pairs of all payoff functions that we created. That is our initial, the first assumption. We can only increase the total sum by depositing more assets. So the payoff of all the reserves is here. And we know that the payoff, sum of payoffs of a subset of short options has to be strictly, non-strictly less than our reserves. And there is a point at which we equalize the slope. Now, this is a very special point because we want to split these all these short options into 2 types of options. The ones that we cover with speculative, so where we give the speculative asset, and the ones where we give the numerator. And how do we do that? We prioritize the highest strike. So whenever I have the 2 short options, for example, one is $2,000 strike, and the other is $5,000 strike. Obviously, I'd rather give 1 ETH to the $5,000 strike first before thinking about the other, because if I don't have enough ETH, then I'd rather pay $2,000 than $5,000. And this is actually a feasible strategy and is the best strategy. So what I can do is I can take, from this point on, I can take all the slope changes and take them as the short option, and this is the red curve. So the sum of all short option which can claim enough speculative are here. Because as we know, short options have slope of 1, exactly 1, at 0. So we know that we're gonna that how much speculative here, the red dotted line, is going to be below, above, not strictly above the red line, which refers to the derivatives settled with speculative. Now, what we were left with is something like this. And how do we know that we have enough numerator for settlement? First, let's note that this point is at a height of how much numerator we have, plus how much speculative we have times this coordinate. So we can think of it as ax plus b. And then it turns out that because we took the high strike prices, until this point, these two lines, the red lines, are perfectly aligned, which means that what we've taken out is exactly the AX component. So we're actually left with just B, which is the amount of numerator that's left. I hope that wasn't too complicated. I'd be happy to explain it better later, but unfortunately, we don't have time for that. So it works. Now, what do we get out of it? Why is it so interesting and cool? Well, first of all, we can get liquidation as debt. And liquidation as debt is simply, I get the upside, and then if the price goes down, at some point, the value should be negative, but we can convey debt, and we don't liquidate, so we just stay at a constant zero price. And this is a call option. If I purchase a call option for ETH at $2,000, I effectively kind of borrow $2,000 for the duration of the option and earn on ETH in the meantime, as long as it's above 2,000. Then I don't lose anymore, which is also cool. For speculation, practically all of these shapes can be used for speculation, but there are some that are very, very interesting to think about. At the money calls and puts that are very close to the current price, whose strike price is very close to the current price. Spreads, here we can replicate insanely huge negative leverage without liquidations, simply by defining such a function. But every shape is useful in speculation. Yield. We can underwrite calls and puts, like in here. I want to have some exposure, the price, let's say, in here, but then I can also lend some of my funds, some of the numerator funds for other people to cover some losses. So my losses are going to be greater if the price goes very, very much down. I'm also going to give up some of the upside, but this way I can earn a lot of yield. MicroStrategy also has a strategy that is very relevant to this, and I think it's not a signal that MicroStrategy is aligned. I think it's a strategy that MicroStrategy has thought about what do they really want, and whenever someone does that, this is probably the best way to express what someone wants. So they want increased BTC leverage, and to do that, they purchase something of a call, but then this lending and the optionality value that is being given is costly. So in order not to pay too much for it, they also underwrite calls, out of the money calls, which acts like which slightly decrease their BTC exposure if BTC performs very well, which is fine. So effectively, with their lenders, they say, hey, please lend me some money. And if BTC is going to rise very, very sharply, you're going to get some of the upside. Then there's hedging. If I'm uncertain about some asset, I can purchase a hedge, which is a put. But you probably won't hold it as a put for too long because it's better to exercise it first, one way, and then you get to withdraw the collateral for the put. Use it for whatever time you have, and then before expiry, turn it back if the asset hasn't failed. Liquidity provision. This one is extremely interesting. So by choosing the right shape, we can replicate any non-degenerate AMM. It can be Curve, it can be Uniswap, V2, V3, any general weighted pools, as long as they have 2 tokens. We can replicate anything simply by stating the payoff curve and all the properties, all the math behind them is encoded in this curve. So, and the liquidity provision, effectively, how it works is we underwrite two options. We create 2 options. We deposit some numerator and some speculative. We have one option that I showed earlier as a Uniswap B2 LP, and this is the second one. The first one is something we're going to be left with after we finish. But this one is the one we use for LPing. And whenever the price diverges, we simply exercise it. and then we get some of the profit. And then when the price diverges the other way around, we again exercise it. And we exercise it as many times as we can and gather some profit in the meantime. And this is the strategy. Now, because of this protocol, what we can do is we can underwrite the payoff of, for example, a Uniswap v2 position. We can create it, and then we can give it to someone else instead. And someone can use any arbitrary strategy that is in line with Uni v2 math. They can change the fees however you want. They can use their own smart contracts. We don't care how they can even not use there for liquidity, just maybe underwriting some other options or hedging some of their positions. It doesn't really matter, but the option seller, someone who has a Uniswap v2 like payoff, gets to be paid a constant value and sell the ability to provide this liquidity without taking any risks of smart contracts that someone is going to use, without taking any risks, operational risks, model risks, because now a lot of strategies, LP strategies are opinionated, and because of that, they get really, really bad, or use oracles, which can be dangerous, can be a good idea as well. Depends. Yeah. So in terms of providing liquidity, this is very, very, very interesting. And then risk stratification. Whenever we have debt, we can have some senior debt, and this is a short option that very unlikely is going to go into these fields where someone loses, and most likely will be at par with dollar. Then we can have mezzanine or junior tranches, which are more risky and will pay out more, and then equity, which is a call option on the value of the firm. We can also use this. We can also, for risk stratification, this is very useful when it comes to securitization. We can take a lot of different positions, a lot of, for example, debt obligations, and we can basket them directly on chain to see what is in there. That's the problem with TradFi. They don't do that. But we can actually see what's in there. We can basket them, and then on top of that, using this protocol, we can underwrite certain tranches and have exactly define what exposure does someone want to have, and soundly. And this wouldn't cause any economic problems if this was used instead. So to summarize, we now have complete payoff control, complete control of the future price payoff. We can design any function that we're interested in, and the design space is so large that I don't think this is a product in itself. I'm not pitching a product. I'm pitching a piece of infrastructure. In order for users to actually get it, we have to constrain these functions heavily and create an interface for a very constrained version so that users will understand. And then it can implement dozens of products simply by this very simple and powerful protocol. It is fully oracleless. It does not require any certain price to be determined. Every single participant can have a different perceived price, and it still works perfectly for everyone. So we don't need the oracles. We don't have to care about market manipulation. And for assets which do not have the price defined, we can still create these. So we can have options, for example, on stocks and describe them on chain, or like company stocks, and then investing for new startups. And then it's perfectly capital efficient. There always has to be a zero of the function, and you can always withdraw whenever, for all prices, the value is going to be at least that. And that's all. Thanks for listening.
Do we have questions? I have a question. How far are you from POC? Do you have POC already?
So this is about 20% of the thoughts I have on the topic. There is an implementation of simple sound options. So the 3 options, and it's 20 lines of code. So we can see how utterly simple this is. Usually options protocol like 500 lines of code, 1,000 lines of code. This is 20 lines of code. And it's not offset to libraries. I'm not using any libraries. Just some helpers maybe, but that's irrelevant. When it comes to the full protocol, there are a lot of other things to consider, like a payoff function representation. So in real implementations, we can't really draw any function, say it's a sign plus a constant value plus square root, because programs usually don't operate on arbitrary functions. We have to constrain this and create a representation that is satisfying. So one of these representations is just a piecewise linear function, and then we can approximate all other functions from that. But then we cannot have like these smooth functions, smoothly changing, so always differentiable, for example. What we can do is we can add, for example, a square root of the price. So say it's not ax plus b, it's ax plus b square roots of price, or a times price times b times square root of price plus c. And this is actually a really nice representation because it's symmetrical when it comes to which token is the numerator and the speculative. And the symmetries, I haven't gone into them, but they're beautiful. And it's also great, but then a problem emerges, which is how do we settle short square root options because they're ranges. And then when they're concave functions, it's more difficult to find the point on chain. The point here, this point where the slope at which the slope achieves or goes beyond the speculative. So it's a little bit tricky in these cases. There are ways to deal with that, but then there's a whole side of a settlement when it comes to determining this point as what algorithms to use. Is it ZK? Is it some other magic? So when it comes to the implementation, there's actually a lot more to consider.
Got it. This is what I wanted to hear. This is what I wanted. There is still a lot to consider.
Excellent.
Amazing.
Thank you.
I love how passionate you are about this. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys, for your attention.